Well, I really, really appreciate you taking the time to come and speak to us online today. And so, yeah, I'll take it away, Zuleika.
Right. So I thought I'd start by giving you just a quick little story of how I actually got started in photography, which actually happened more years than I care to remember. Back when I used to live in London, and I worked in a really famous goth rock bar in Camden Market, and just hanging out and in lots of very interesting circles there. I started photographing strippers and fetish models and burlesque dancers, and because they'd all need pictures for their websites and their promotional content, and so I practice on them basically, and just they were my friends, but we also helped each other out, and we do shoots together, and that's where I got the basis of my craft started, and that's where I think a lot of, you'll see later on when I'm going through the portfolio, a lot of the work that I do, you can see where it comes from, that starting early days there. This image here, or these images, this is a recent shoot I did. I was commissioned by this guy here, whose name is Paul. He's in his 80s, and he has this World War II Jeep that he's had for about 50 years, and he's been taking it apart and rebuilding it over the years a number of times, and he was in the middle of the whole process of restoring it and wanted me to come in and document that. But this Jeep has been with him for 50 years, so the symbolism of this Jeep is so integrated into his life and his storyline that this wasn't just a shoot to tell the Jeep story. This was very much about telling his story. And the way that we got through this was very much just sitting there, listening to his story, listening to all of the things that he was telling me about his life, which was absolutely fascinating, by the way. He built himself a canoe from scratch with his own hands, but that's a whole other thing. And so whilst listening to his stories, I was thinking the whole time and observing him and trying to pay attention to what is it that shines through the most about this person? What character elements stand out to me? What characters seem the most important to bring through when I'm photographing him? And one of those things is this guy's really eccentric, and he's really he's got quite a interesting humor about him, and there's this quirkiness to him which is absolutely wonderful, and you can just come through in all the stories that he's telling. And so I really wanted to try and bring this out in the photographs that we did together, and thinking, how do you tell a story of a person's life with a few images? And so to do that, it's about paying attention to the tiny details. This is very much shot in a documentary style, but with a little bit of directing. So, for example, the hat that you can see here is an old flight helmet, and there is a story that goes behind that as well, but he uses that when he's working on the bottom of the Jeep, and he made that sign on the wall himself as well. And just by subtle directing, you can help to pull out those little parts of him. And it was very much about me taking a step back and immersing myself in his world rather than bringing him into my world. It was very much about just putting them first rather than putting your own ideas first, and just really trying to step inside their mind and see how you can work out how they tick and what's going on there. Which leads me a little bit to this image here. This is a quote which you may or may not know already. It's not always the photographer's job to make the subject feel ease, and Annie Leibovitz said that, which brings a point that, or a question really. Annie Leibovitz reckons that you don't have to always make your subjects feel comfortable to get the best work. This is, I think, very subjective and very dependent on who you are as a photographer, I think. You've got to ask yourself, are you the sort of person that can bring the best out of someone by pushing them a little bit and maybe having the courage to make them feel a little bit uncomfortable, but doing it in the right way to bring out the best sides of that person's personality? Or is it about showing your vulnerability and letting your subjects know that you are human too, and you are you have a vulnerable side too, and in doing that you almost create a bond with your subject and you lower the barriers, which by doing so you can actually get so much more as well. And this is all up to date. You could debate this for days, probably, which one, but it's something that's worth thinking about when you're doing your jobs and your commissions and you're working with people, is thinking about which type of person are you, which one is more relevant to who you are. This image here was, he was talking about his wife who passed away, I think only a couple of years ago. And this was just a really quiet moment that happened just in the middle of having all these conversations. And I only managed to get that because I allowed him to feel safe.
And Zuleika, before you move on to that one,
yeah,
can I ask you how long you spent with him, please?
So in total, I probably spent about a week. And actually, I only spent probably about 2 days shooting out of all that time. A lot of the time was just him showing me the car, him showing me around the garage. He'd pull out old books and old manuals from the car, and he'd be telling me all these things. He'd tell me stories about how he built this canoe in Canada somewhere, and all these different things. And I did have my camera on me the whole time that I was with him. I was just about looking for those right moments, really, and being very select. Rather than getting in there and going shoot, I would go in there and spend more time observing and actually waiting for the moments that actually
to unfold,
yeah, and spoke. So you got to be, it's a lot of patience, really. I think there's a lot of patience involved there, and of course this is only one style of going about this. This is a very slow paced way, I think, of getting your story. And you don't always have time to do that, unfortunately, with your jobs. But this is very much, I'd say this is a very gentle approach. And this worked really well for this situation because of the nature of the person I was working with and the story that he wanted. And I mean, this guy wanting to document about 50 years of his life, you can't do that in a day. So I think it takes time to really lose yourself in that a little bit and just wait for those shining moments to come through, which comes back to these situations here. And just waiting, like the face he's got, the funny face, and that moment there just really pinpointed a part of his character, which you see in real life. You can see this part of him, and it's so wonderful. He's got this such a hilarious character, and it comes through. And just little moments like that, which might not be the most flattering image, but it's the most poignant image because it really holds a lot of truth to who he is as a person. And down to the little details you see in the background. We could have removed all of this out in the back, but we kept it because each little detail is really relevant to his story.
Thank you.
And this, I've skipped far too forward. This is Fantastic Miss Fanny. Some of you might have seen this person propped up. If you know my work, you see that I work with this lady quite a lot. She is a burlesque performer, a compere, and drag artist. And these photos were shot when she was about 8 months pregnant, I believe, if I remember right. And interestingly, it was this shoot which led to the photographs of Paul and his Jeep. He saw these pictures and then loved them so much he wanted me to commission me to come do work for him as well. Which shows that not always the job you're doing, it can lead to work which is really unexpected sometimes, and it doesn't always seem like it makes sense, but you never know what you can get from what you're doing currently. So it's always worth practicing and getting out there. So this shoot here, as I said, this was shot when she was 8 months pregnant, and she came to me and she wanted me to do a series of portraits of her. And I know her quite well, so I know a lot about who she is, but we were talking, and this was a very collaborative piece here. And it was about showcasing who she is as a performer, and who she is as a person, everyday person, and as a mother, and all those components of her character, bringing that all together. And this is a really good example of how sometimes you want to set up your environment, set up your scene, and let a story unfold after you've done the curation. So this is shot slightly differently to how I shot the story of Paul, where this one had a lot more, there's a lot more interaction from me coming in from this. By setting the scene, we thought very carefully about the colors we use. We think very carefully about the setting, clearing out all the details in the kitchen because that for us was relevant. And the rest was just let to unfold naturally. So things like this picture here, what you can see is her drinking ketchup. This is all Sally. This is all her just being herself. And it's just being ready to spot that moment and grab it whilst you can. Bear with me, just going back to my notes. So as you can see, there's quite a difference here between working with a candid style and then also the curated style. And both is all about how you can bring out parts of someone's personality. And a little bit of it actually is looking for elements in what you're working with or who you're working with that speak to you and bring, maybe you want to tell little bits of your own story. And I think we are all interlinked in some way or another, and as humanity, and there's always going to be traits that you can empathize with yourself, and there's elements that you can truly connect with. And it's about looking for that connection and looking for that spark which triggers something inside of you, and looking for maybe something that you can identify with yourself. And it's very much about blurring all of these little elements together. Like this one here, for example. This was very much, she was getting tired by this point. But also, again, we thought there was important to show the sense of humor coming through here. And we actually didn't retouch these images very much on purpose. If you can see back to this one, we thought it was very important to not perfect all the tiny little details, because that's it adds to the narrative, and it's really, really important parts of the narrative. Like, look at this little bit here on her underwear that could be retouched out, but it's important. It's a part of, it seems trivial and small, but these are all tiny little details which are really important to telling your overall narrative in the image. Let's see. This is also goes back into whether you bring people into your world or whether you immerse yourself into other people's worlds as well. And it's all about, this here is, I'd say, me immersing myself into her world and me immersing myself into who she is, and looking at who she is as a person, but who she is as a performer as well, and bringing those two characters together. So here's a little history show photos for you here. These photos are actually some of the first photos I've ever taken. These are back from my days in London, where I used to live round the corner from a dominatrix dungeon, and knew some of the girls who worked there. I would photograph some of their promotional material for them, and they let me come in and just hang out with them and work, doing some photography of just their general lives and things that are going on backstage there. And these are interesting to me because of it's more about the emotions that come through with these images, and it's about looking for the storyline which you don't see on the surface. You know, it's about delving deeper into someone's characteristics and someone's story and trying to see the unobvious story. And that works on two levels here, because this world is really not something we see on a daily basis. But it's quite an interesting way that I got my start in this as well. Those images link very strongly into this exhibition. And it was actually because of those pictures that I actually started this whole project here. You guys probably saw the posters floating around the college a little while ago, because this was, I think, one of the last things I did before lockdown, actually. Let's put this exhibition on. This is quite an ongoing project that I did, and it's all about authenticity and honesty, and following burlesque performers and drag queens and sideshow performers and all of these sort of people, and looking at what is it that makes it so interesting for people? What is it that they love about it? What is it that makes them tick? And a lot of it boils down to, I think, authenticity, body positivity, inclusivity, community, and it's just a creative outlet for celebrating who we are as humans. There's a lot of freedom in that as well, I think, and it's all about people who are not afraid to be themselves, people who are not afraid to follow a slightly different path in order to just be free, I suppose. And these are some of the pictures from that set. And we should talk a little bit about what makes them interesting compositionally. Thinking about little details in terms of composition. Even if you're doing documentary work or candid work, it's really important to think about the composition that you are looking at when you're taking a shot or looking for a shot. This is not a set-up shot. This is something that unfolded naturally. But it's about paying attention to how you frame your image. I moved myself to the point where I could see, for me, I think symmetry was really important here. And it really highlighted the, what's the word? The collaborative sort of calm state that was happening in the backstage area. And there's a really nice complementary sort of balance going on. And I thought because of that, it was really important to show that balance in the image visually as well by creating that symmetry and the breathing space around the image. Here is another really good example of just sometimes keeping it really simple is one of the strongest ways of telling your story and making something show through. Here, Sally caught me with my camera and pulled this funny face. But I really felt like just having nothing much going on in the background was really important with these images. It just allows the subject matter to show through. And that's also interesting why I shot all of these in black and white, because when you're photographing a project over a long period of time, sometimes it can be a little tricky to keep your consistency in terms of temperature, color, and all of those sort of things, especially if you're working in different locations and different settings and different times of day and all of those things. So in terms of longevity and consistency, I chose to keep them all black and white just because there's a timeless element there, which I think just ties it all together in a really nice way.
I was just about to ask that question. Because I imagine it's quite a colourful environment.
Oh yeah, it's really colourful. So this image here is a really good example of, if this was in colour, the clashes that would be going on between all the different colours and the tones and the sparkly things and the makeup and the labels. And I mean, you've all studied a bit of colour theory, I'm guessing, or know some understanding, and that know that your eye is drawn to certain colours first. And certain things like reds and yellows and things like that will always draw the eye most in an image. And little things like makeup bottles and things like this, you don't want your eye to go to that first, not in this setting situation anyway. And by just taking all of that out, just really allows you to focus on your subject and the topics that you are trying to portray. And this is a shot that was taken in front of the mirror. As you can see, this side of the image here is clearly where the mirror is, and you can't see the mirror, and there's a lot going on in this image, but it works because there's a flow. And if you look at the lines that come through, it starts here and it flows through the light and the lines and the direction that the models are all looking at. It just gives you a really easy flow, which gives a clear narrative and just helps you to understand and navigate the image in a way that allows your brain to make up the rest of the story in its own. It adds a certain element of curiosity as well. Again, this is another really good example of just using simplicity and really simple leading lines to just draw attention to your subject matter. And just by literally just using these handrails here, just to draw you straight into the middle of the image. And by framing the image in a really central way like that, just made the performer bang center pop, and just all your attention is on her. And you just want to know what's going on. It makes you think about the expression on her face. It makes you think about the things in her hand. Why has she got those things? What is she doing? You can kind of get an idea of the story, but there's an element of curiosity as well there, because if you don't know exactly what's happening, it allows you to just sort of drift a little bit, and it allows you to think and make up your own story yourself. This image here is a really good example of, if the nipple tassels were not in this image, if I took them out completely, or if you just could see the image from the guy's shoulders up, it would not be anywhere remotely as interesting a photograph. It's because of those pasties and because of the direct gaze. That's what suddenly makes this image way more interesting. Again, it's all about curiosity, and it's about leaving stuff to the imagination, but just giving just enough of the right information to allow the viewer's mind to fill in the blanks themselves and ask questions and wonder as well. Same goes with that little detail of what's going on in his hand here. You kind of makes you think, what is that? What's going on? What's he doing? This is a shot that was taken as part of the live stuff I used to do. The reason why this image is such a powerful image is purely because of the expression on her face and the movement. And I was talking a little bit about when do you choose emotion over technicality when you're working with your images. So as much as you want your images to be technically perfect and technically beautiful, sometimes you need to pay attention to emotion in your image. And sometimes emotion is just a little bit more important when you're working with shots. And this is a really good example of that, because...
Do you think, Zuleika, that is because you always have a narrative and kind of a sequence of images, that emotion is really important?
Yeah, I think it's partly to do with when you're telling your narrative, you want to think about what is the story you're telling and how can I keep consistent with that story, and what do I need to show in order to tell that story. But also, I think even if you had a standalone image, you want to think about what makes people linger that little bit longer on a photograph. What is it that keeps people there rather than just moving on to the next image? And more times than not, it's if you can evoke emotion, emotion will hold your attention that little bit longer than technicalities. I think that's a personal opinion. So this image here, whilst that hand being slightly cut off there drives me nuts, as it might to you, and technically that's technically a big no-no really, or a big faux pas, the expression and the emotion that comes through here, I would say I would allow that to slip through, and I would place this image as part of a editorial sequence I would not put this image as a standalone image though. So when I did my exhibition of this show, this shot didn't make the cut. It almost did, but it didn't. Purely on the technicality of the hand being cropped off there. And so it's just about paying attention to the balance there of the two, and paying attention to how you're sequencing your images and where they're going to go at the end. Thinking about your storyline, thinking about what is your narrative? How are you going to tell this story? Are you wanting to tell this story in one image? In which case, I think you want to really think about how you're going to balance emotion, how you're going to balance character, how you're going to balance your technicalities, and how are you going to use all of these components to best tell that story in your one image. Whereas if you want to sequence maybe an editorial and you want maybe 8 to 10 images, that does allow room to play. And when you're sequencing images, you think about quite often it's the small, insignificant details which tell the biggest stories when you're sequencing photos together. A bit like this one. This one here works really well because of the curiosity it evokes, and there's very little information in this image. If you look, like, it's, you can see the girl's face reflected, you can see a little bit of what's going on next to her, but otherwise it's all left to the imagination, which is just inviting the viewer to run with their imagination and to get lost and to finish the story on their own. Moving on to how I blur the lines between this sort of documentary work and fashion world now. This series here, these shoots, I wanted to try and move more towards the fashion industry, and I really wanted to try and move my work more into straightforward, how I can move it into commercial work, and rather than more kind of editorial documentary sort of style work. And so I was thinking about what I learned through working with the performers and the burlesque artists and all these people, and I was thinking about how can I bring what I learned and bring it into the fashion industry? How can I bring this and these elements? What can I take that will create a really sellable image? And for me, I think the key points here were theatricality and drama, and I think authenticity was a really important point here, which is something that I tie into all my work really to some extent. But how can I bring those elements into fashion imagery, which can oftentimes be not very authentic, as I can say. It's highly manipulated. It's all about the clothes. It's all about how we can sell the clothes. It's all about how we can sell a lifestyle. How do we sell these products and create this whole illusion to our customers to make them want to buy into this universe through these products? And here I was playing with drama and that theatricality through the disco ball head thing, and transferring it into the lingerie industry. And just the working with lingerie was quite an easy transition from burlesque, because it's all very interlinked, those worlds, a little bit. So here all I did was remove the documentary aspect of it and transferred it directly into the fashion element here. This was a curated setup. I basically tore my apartment apart so I could create this location and sourced the disco ball through really, really lovely alumni of the same course that you guys are doing. Thank you, John Cooney. And yeah, then it was very similar process to the settings when we were shooting with Sally in the kitchen. Is I We chose the outfits, we chose the location, we curated very much what you can see, but then we let the story unfold naturally. And even though I picked a fashion model rather than a performer, we let her just be herself. We let her bring parts of her character to come through. I gave her the disco ball and said, got a hole in it, do you want to stick it on your head? And that just pulled out characteristics, because it's a bit like when you play fancy dress, you can use fancy dress to pull elements of your character and your personality out and let that shine through. And by doing that, that enabled me to bring the authenticity back into the imagery, rather than it just being, let's just do a posed image with some model in some underwear and a disco ball on their head. Any questions so far, by the way?
They're all very quiet.
Fine, I shall carry on. This is just another shot from the same shoot in colour. Even though I work a lot in black and white, colour photography is actually my favourite, funny enough. You wouldn't know it, seeing the amount of black and white photos I have. It's what I love the most. But again, it's sometimes you have to think about what do I need and what is aiding my narrative the most. And sometimes you do have to remove colour from that just to help with that narrative. Here, I wanted to bring out a certain softness. So this is why I shot with very soft tones, very gentle colour palette here, because there was a really interesting contradiction between the absurdity of the disco ball, which adds is a very surreal element to add into the mix, really. But it creates a certain amount of voyeurism within the image, as well as allowing the viewer, it eases the tension slightly. So it's quite a voyeuristic image, but at the same time, it's quite an odd and slightly humorous image. And just playing with that tension between the slightly uneasy feeling of I'm staring at a woman in her underwear, and the humor element with the disco ball, playing with it just plays with the narrative, and it plays with the tension levels. It plays also, there's an element of empowerment as well. So if you look at lingerie imagery, a lot of the time the model's head is cut off straight away from the neck down. You get basically a shot of the woman's boobs from her chin to wherever. And this is very much playing with that concept, but rather than just cutting the neck off, we use the disco ball instead. And that draws your attention to the garments and to her body. We also decided to leave all her folds and her natural body exactly the way it was. In a lot of high fashion imagery, each little fold would be touched out, so you'd see perfect curves and there wouldn't be a single bit of marks. You'd probably retouch that bit of hair out there as well. And we left this all in on purpose because we feel like it was just really important points to make, which it's all about making people feel comfortable in their own skin. It's taking your power back, which is a lot about what we're playing with here. The shoots with the disco ball led onto this work here. This is a commission from a independent label that I work with sometimes, and she just sends me pieces and I shoot them for her, and then she does whatever she wants with them. And her brand is lingerie for women, made by women, and it's all about feeling comfortable in your own skin. It's about women feeling good in their bodies, regardless of what shape they are, what size they are. It's about learning to love all of the little parts of you and all of those quirky little things that make you you. So taking what I knew about the brand and the brand story, I thought I'd see how I can show this off in its best light, whilst also incorporating my own traditional elements into it here. And we did this through, again, setting a scene and letting it unfold with a little bit of curation going on. So, for example, the fruit and the drinks here and the board, all of these elements was very, very carefully selected as really important symbolism that helps to push the narrative within the story of the images. And again, the way the models just sat there in a really relaxed way, how you can see her body is just in its natural state, but she feels good, she's comfortable, she's relaxed, she is happy. That's all adding to the story here. Again, using the pear tree, just and reflecting the fruit in the tree with the fruit on the table, just ties the images together. It brings a certain flow where your eye is then going around the image and following the lines that are going around, which then builds the story with layers and layers. Fruit, as you know, is so rich with symbolism, and there's an element of luxury, of health, of well-being, and there's all of these elements that are connected with fruit. There's also quite a seductive sexual element to fruit as well, and so breaking these elements into the images all help to build those little subtle layers of a story. This is part of the same collection. I think this was an autumn-winter collection, if I believe it or not. So this is why we went for slightly moodier tones. It was still really hot late summer when we shot, taking advantage of the last days of summer, but also wanting to bring in those sort of the luxury, rich tones that you'd feel through autumn-winter. Using the sheet in the background was a way of helping the lingerie and the model really stand forward in an image and really showcase the dark lingerie, which otherwise could have disappeared if I'd just had the bush and the objects behind. It also creates focal point, helps you really, really pay attention to the items in the lingerie, whilst also creating another layer of interest as well. It adds to the storyline a little bit. It adds to, it helps keep it real. She's lounging on a washing line, which is slightly weird, but it also works because, you know, here it's just another example of very careful placements and setting your scene carefully, using all the fruit and the pears. The book was chosen as well. Every colour in this shot was selected to complement the lingerie, and it was all selected just to help bring the lingerie forward and help to bring the colours of the lingerie forward. And the way we lay out the shot with the fruit on the book, and it makes it feel candid but also intentional at the same time. Yeah. So here's a really good example of how sometimes shoots you do can directly lead towards paid shoots. So The shoot on the left is actually a shot I did as part of my Cowgirls Welcome magazine, which I shot in a laundrette. And there was this whole story about going on road trips and adventures and things like that, and using a laundrette as part of that story. And a client saw that shoot and said, "Can you reproduce this shoot for me, but exactly the same with my t-shirts?" And that led to this shoot here with the South Coast Rats, I think it was. And this is just directly, sometimes just experimenting and doing personal work can just go directly informing into paid work as well. And there's no harm in reproducing an old shoot as well. If you've done a shoot that works really well and it was just an idea you're playing with, and a client sees it and they go, "Oh, I really love that. Can I have that as well?" There's absolutely no harm in taking that concept and then just tweaking it and making it fit your brand and the client that you're working with. And there you go. Here's another couple of photos from that same shoot with the laundrette. This was shot very guerrilla style. So we would basically set the models up, got a storyline, went in there and out of there as quickly as possible without it before anyone saw us. Bit naughty, but you know. Moving more into fashion imagery. This set was commissioned by an actor who wanted some photos. He was moving into the world of modeling and extra work, and wanted some photos just for his portfolio so he could showcase himself as a model, but also himself as a character actor as well, and how he can bring out his character and play with different elements with his character. This set was very much about the balance between masculine and feminine. And it's how we can bring out and play with those sides. If you look at the way he's stood there, his pose is a very masculine pose. It's very strong. It's very decided. But the outfit is obviously quite a feminine outfit. Is very earthy. The earth tones complement the other color palettes that are going on around the picture. The clothes on the washing line as well are really important components of this image, because they help to give a little bit of a clue between the playful balance there between the masculine and the feminine, and it adds an element of curiosity. It raises questions. Why are those there? Is that his clothes? Is that someone else's clothes? What's going on here in the story? What is he doing? Again, with using the pitchfork, that is really important, because it helps to just, firstly, it brings balance in the image in a compositional way. So there's a really nice balance between elements that are going on this side of the image and then elements that are going on over this side here. It also allows the message to follow through with the welly boots and the garden tools and the little things going on here. Helps to, all these subtle details are all what builds up a narrative, and it's really worth just paying attention to every tiny little detail that you're adding into your image. All of this clutter in the background here is we left it there on purpose because it adds to the image, it adds to the story, it adds to the character which we are creating here. And all of these little tiny layers all come together in this beautiful balance that just get this really nice character balance narrative going on in this story. And this is a good example of whether you want to use direct gaze or indirect gaze with your stories. So whether you are creating a narrative which is for fashion, or are you creating a narrative which is more, say, for a journalistic piece or a portrait series, or any of those, like each outcome that you're thinking of, there's little tiny things which have little tiny actions you can take which have a big impact. So this image here on the right, you can get a very, very different feeling because he is not paying attention to the image. He's not looking directly at the camera, which allows you to oops, I've just skipped forward. He allows you to look around the image a little bit more. You also are drawn to the scarf, first of all, rather than his face, which the scarf then leads you down to his outfit. It leads you to his hand. It leads you to the shovel. And there's a lot more of a softer impact on the focal points of the image. Whereas on the left-hand side here, because he is looking directly at you, you connect with his face first. That changes the intention of the image a lot, just because of that direct gaze. It changes the feeling of the image. It changes how you feel as well. And it really plays with the narrative in a big way, just for those two tiny, tiny moments. So always worth considering. What do you want to say? What's the purpose? And then just think, do I need my subject to look directly at me, or do I need them to look at me? All these tiny things play a big part in the final outcome of your work. Again, playing with the balance between soft and strong here, by the 1 foot on the fork there, and there's a certain power in the way he's standing, which again plays a lot with the whole masculine and the feminine, and which how you blur the lines between the two, basically. So food for thought. Moving on a little bit, this is actually going back in time slightly. This is a series of shoots I created for my magazine, Cowgirls Welcome. The theme for this magazine was basically, this magazine was pretty much a collaboration or a collection of all things that were very much a part of my personality, and using all this storytelling and models and fashion photography and all these elements to bring out parts of who I am, very much bringing the viewer into my world. And I couldn't go on a big road trip around America for obvious financial reasons and deadlines and all of those sort of things. So we looked around and did a lot of work searching what we had available to us, looking at our existing locations around Devon and Cornwall and Plymouth, and manipulated those situations and manipulating what we had available to tell the story that we wanted to tell. And in this case, the story was some sort of dark, moody, Western kind of feeling. And this was shot up on Dartmoor using, I think we went up there really early in the morning, and we found these abandoned buildings and thought they were just absolutely perfect for creating the story that we wanted to tell. And because there's a strong line through the image from the building, I placed the leather jacket there to tie in the whole photograph. So this was a intentional styling placement within the image, because I knew that it would help link the story together, and it links the whole elements together. Also, if I'd have chosen a different model, different sighting, this image could have quite easily told a whole different story. Softer color palette would have given a whole different feel, because I wanted to bring out those dark elements. Just thinking about how you style your model, thinking about all those tiny details that you place in the in your shoot really helps to lead the direction that you want to go with your story. So in this case, giving the model dark, edgy clothing, I wanted to give a little bit of a rock and roll feel to the story as well. And again, using the tasseled leather waistcoat and all these little touches really help just to add those subtle layers. And also through careful framing, this is how I was able to create the illusion of being wherever you want them to be.
Zuleika, do you do all your own styling?
I do, yeah.
Yeah. Do you enjoy that as much as you enjoy taking the photos, do you think?
Oh, I love it. It's actually, I think it's such an important part of the creative process. Styling and how you style your work is just as important in terms of where your narrative goes, as composition and lighting and framing and all of these sort of things, and location. So if you don't feel confident styling, I do advise working with a stylist, or finding a stylist or someone who's really good at styling and being able to transfer your story through styling and really getting what it is you want to tell. We'll just have a drink of water a sec. But if it is something that you feel comfortable with, do play with it. And I think there's no right or wrong with styling necessarily. What does matter is the styling you're using helping to solidify the characters that you're creating? Does it help to contribute to the narrative you're trying to tell? This is where little tiny details are so important. So this shoot here is actually a fake camping trip, which we did in an afternoon. We wanted to tell a story of road trips and camping, and we packed a few items, and we didn't need a whole camping trip's worth of stuff. All we needed was some key objects which helped to solidify that narrative. Things like the cup and the bowls and the pan and all those things. It's just choosing those careful objects and placing them in the right way, which just help to reinforce it. Think of it as a support system for your work, basically.
Zuleika, I've got a question.
Yeah.
Well, it's not from me, it's from a student, but I'll read it. So when considering styling, what resources do you use to plan your shoots? Pinterest boards, movie inspiration, etc.?
Oh, all of the above. So my starting point changes quite often. Sometimes a piece of clothing will be my inspiration for a shoot. Sometimes I have a shoot and then I'll look for clothing and items which support my photo idea. So my starting point is I will use things like magazines, movies, Pinterest, books, and anything you can get your hands on. Sometimes I will even be inspired by people I see on the street or people that I see anywhere. You know, inspiration. Don't feel constrained when it comes to looking for how you compile things together. Don't be afraid of talking to people as well. Like, so many times if I'll have an idea or I'll be looking for something, reach out to a local business or reach out to charity shops or vintage stores or anything, and seeing what, just have a chat with them, be friendly. You never know, they might be able to help each other out, and work with that. Also, something that is really, really, really underestimated is look in your own bedroom. Just ask your model, look at what you've got, look at what your family's got, what your mates have got. What do you guys have already that you can use and tell the story? And I actually reuse things a lot, and I have all sorts of weird things I've collected over the years, and I keep them because I reuse them again and again, and I can tell very different stories depending on how I use it. So just don't be afraid of having a rummage and use it, just because I think sometimes when it's yours, you feel like it's not special. You can feel like it's not special enough, or it's not good enough to be used in a shoot, and maybe it won't create the right impact. But it's all about how you use it, not what it is. That's generally a good secret there. And someone told me a really good line once years ago, and it stuck with me. It was, it's not what you wear, it's how you wear it. And I think I take that when I'm putting elements together, and that is when I'm creating a story or when I'm creating a character, I very much keep that line in my head. And I use Pinterest for compiling my mood boards, just because it's easy, and I generally can't be asked to spend hours creating little pretty mood boards, especially when you're working on several shoots all at once. You don't have the time for that, so you just want to be quick. I also use Google Docs, actually. I'll just drop a whole bunch of images into Google Docs. I will add a whole lot of notes as well that is really important for my client to know, like model names, model sizes, models, anything that I need the client to know about the model, location information, and I will drop in mood board photos, product photos, just create a little Google Doc of everything you need to know, export it as a PDF and share it with your clients and your models and your stylists and your makeup artists or whoever else you need to know. And actually having that document is so, so, so important for helping a shoot go smoothly. It really, really, really makes a difference when everybody you're working with is on board the same with the same idea and the same plate. And if everybody can see a little bit about what's going on inside your head, that helps them to then get the same vision in their heads as well, and then they can then contribute to that in a much more in sync way, and your shoots will just flow together in and just be more stronger, and just the images you'll get out of that, I think, will really make a difference.
Zuleika, we've got probably about 20 minutes, and then I maybe have a bit more kind of interactive Q&A.
Yeah, we're nearly the end now, so
okay, cool.
These last ones I shall clip through. This is just some examples from the magazine, and this is just some examples of the way you place images next to each other has a big impact of the story you're telling. So individually, these images might not be so powerful, or they might not tell as much of your image, but by sequencing your photos and thinking about how you're going to sequence your photos has a big impact on the story and the emotions that are coming through. The next couple of images are basically the same sort of thing here. And these all together really help to tell that strong story. Again, this is all about using what you have available to you, and using what you're surrounded with and making the most out of that. You don't always need the most fanciest equipment and the best locations and the most exotic sets to create amazing work. You can create amazing work with literally what you have in your backyard if you want to. This is just another example of using your locations and surroundings to create your story. This was shot, I think, about 7 o'clock in the morning, so we could get that right, the correct light, and get that really nice blue lighting, which creates that beautiful mood. This is a current project I'm working on called How Are You? It's a more positive look on mental health, and mental health is quite a big topic at the moment. We're all dealing with a lot of things, and I thought I'd play with the symbolism of the duvet and the relevance it has, and how we relate to that. What does the duvet evoke in you? And quite often it's feelings of nurturing and protection, and some people even said it evokes feelings of returning to the womb as well. And when you're dealing with depression and anxiety and various other mental health things like that, there's quite often a lot of negative media available out there for talking about this, and it talks about mental health in a very heavy way. And I thought I'd try and open the topic up for discussion and talk about it from a point of view of someone who has a lot of experience with this subject, and also looking at what makes people feel better. So I photographed a series of people. I'm still working on this project. This is an ongoing thing, where I shot people in their duvets in a location that made them happy. And this is where you see the next points of view here. I'll skip past this one because we don't have much time.
No, we do. It's fine. We've got 20 minutes.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, we've got enough time. We've got until 4, and we can run over.
I got plenty of time.
Make sure that, because I know what it's like when you're talking to a screen. You're not quite sure how long you've got. So I just, you've still got 20 minutes, and you can run over. I just wanted to have a bit more of kind of a relaxed kind of Q&A, because it'd be nice to see you, to see people's faces. We can see you, so you can't see us.
So here's a little exercise to wake you guys up a little bit if you need to. Tell me which image you think is the better image. And you can put it in the comment section.
Okay, so we've got second landscape, second right, second. Anyone else? Second, or everyone's saying the same. Left, or Josh is being different.
And can anyone now tell me why they think it's better?
Oh, silence, Zuleika. Come on, why? Narrative.
So this is the mental health project, bear in mind. This is all part of documenting what makes people feel better about themselves, what makes it's talking about anxiety, it's talking about depression, it's talking about what we do to nurture ourselves and to protect ourselves and to heal ourselves. And actually, for this whole narrative, I selected the image on the left rather than the image on the right, if you can see them, because if you pay attention to so compositionally, the image on the right is quite interesting because you've got the greenhouse, you've got the chairs going on here. The balance of the image is quite nice.
The dean said the greenhouse is to escape and gardening is good for the soul.
That's a good one. That's a really good one. But what I was paying attention to is my subject's face. And looking at which image tells me, just lets me in to that person a little bit and tells me a little bit more about what's going on with that person. And also by taking away all the background, you zone in straight away on the duvet and the subject matter, and then everything else sort of disappears into the background, which is the third years. Actually, a lot of the third years said the opposite picture to what all you guys said, which is quite funny.
I think that I can see what you're saying. I can understand why you picked that one, but also I do agree. I do think that the other one could work as well. And particularly, I think the second years are picking that one because of what you've been saying and what you've been talking about, kind of visual clues, kind of symbolism, creating a story. So is this, obviously you've spoken to third years, is this the first time you've kind of shown this work? Because this is obviously work in progress.
Oh yeah, this is all work in progress, this stuff. And actually, I ended up using both of these images, so actually neither one is wrong. It's just very interesting to hear, because hear other people's, like how people can judge which picture is what they think is good, what they think is not good. It's all very subjective as well. And it goes to show things can change so much depending on what it is you're trying to say. Here's just another image from the series. This is one of my favorite images. However, it doesn't necessarily work completely for the series.
It's really interesting because we've been talking, well, you know, when we did the photo essay in the first year when you were a student, obviously the students have been doing that, but they did that in their first year. But because of the situation now, we've set sort of some simulated client briefs. So the second years are working on a client brief module. We've done, I've asked them to produce, they don't have to, they can pick, we've got 4 different options and they can pick like 1 or 2 to work on. One of them is a photo essay, and we've been discussing how sometimes you might have an image that you absolutely love, which is your hero image, but actually in terms of the narrative and the sequence, it doesn't work.
Exactly.
Yes, that's really great that you're showing them this.
Yeah, like this one, I'll use this image for other things. I might just stick it on my wall, I'll put it on Instagram, you know, you put it in your portfolio. But as a sequence for the story and for the project that I'm working on, it just doesn't tell the right story, and it doesn't tell me enough information. It just doesn't flow. So I'll use it as inspiration, and I might go and shoot something like that again and try and make it work and try and see if I can create shoots which have the same feel but do have a much stronger narrative and that do work with the story.
Well, I think it works, Zuleika.
We took a long time to think about this, and I think it's because you can't see enough of the subject's face.
Okay.
This is what these conversations I've had with other people, and this is what a lot of people say. And I think
what I think. Can I ask the students what they think?
Yeah, tell me.
I don't know. Nobody said anything yet, but I thought it might be. What does everyone else think?
I like the sunlight that comes through, like through the trees, and just
that's my favourite too.
On the top of her head, so like it draws you in down to her.
Be really interesting to put them in as a sequence, Zuleika, and see how they kind of flow.
Yeah,
and to understand why you've kind of removed it from that sequence. We've been seeing this. So
what I actually did with this project is I printed all the pictures out, stuck every picture on my wall with glue tack, and I just
what I do.
For weeks.
Yeah, that's what I do.
I stared at them, and then I'd move them around, and sometimes I'd take pictures off and chuck them away. Then I'd bring them back out again because I'm like, nope, I want that one.
That's exactly what I did when I was doing my book.
And sometimes, it's just, there's something about this image which just didn't quite fit, and it's all about, I think it is about, it's all down to the story you're trying to tell, basically. And
you said the light at the end of the tunnel, it's breaking through, so there's light at the end of the tunnel, so it could be your
exactly. And this is my final image of my presentation. Brings us bang up to date here. This is actually part of my same project, the mental health project. This image was shot with my camera through a monitor on FaceTime. So because obviously we're in lockdown, we can't do very much at the moment, and we can't get out there, we can't work with people. I wanted to still try and keep creating, keep working, and just keep moving forward. So I plugged my laptop into my husband's monitor and cleaned it first. Then we got my camera and just set up FaceTime, and I collaborated with Rafi there and helped her to create a space. And we walked around the house and just find the best light and best time of day, and we brought in and moved things around to try and create a space that was good to shoot in. Removing objects, moving the bed around, things like that, and very much directing through the video camera to help create this shoot. And then I just shot with my camera shot the monitor essentially, and whilst Rafi was posing, and I would direct Rafi, tell her to move where I needed her to move whilst we're doing that. This particular shot was actually a candid moment in between all of the directing, which is something I do quite a lot. I will tell my model to pose in a particular way, and then I will wait for the moment just after that, because that's usually where the golden shots come. And it's just after the after you've done all your posing and your setting up and all of those things, just keep your eye open for the split second just afterwards, because that's when the best moments happen. And if you can grab those moments, you get almost a balance between something that has been set up and directed and curated and that authentic, real feeling, which is what we've got here. This was very much playing through my playing with other ideas of the Duvet project, and it's actually called How Are You? That's the name of the project. And I'm going to be exploring this concept, I think, a little bit further through, and photographing virtually like that is it was an interesting experience, I have to say. I've heard a lot of people have a very conflicted feelings over shooting through video, but I personally feel like it's actually wonderful, because do you know what? You're still creating, and it opens up your world to it's such a huge way. You're not just photographing people you have immediate access with, you're photographing people in theory all over the country, all over the world even. Your imagination is your limits, and all you got to do is send a friendly message out there to someone, and you never know what will come out of it. So there you go, and that is it.